is Allie with the Perception Trainers, author of the Perception Diet, and today I have part 1 in my 3-part series on how to become your higher self. Okay, so if you haven't already done so, I want you to go back and watch the video that was posted just before this one on dealing with your self-sabotaging voice, okay? Because that is the foundation for everything we're going to go on to talk about in this series. So if you haven't watched that, this is not going to be as effective or as efficient for you as it could be. So I want you to go back and do that. And I want you to practice the technique that is in that video a couple of times before you start applying this stuff. All right? So that's that. So yeah, stop now if you haven't watched, go watch it, and then you can come back to this one and everything will be great. All right. So now, in my 3-part series on how to become your highest self, part 1, we are going to talk about, okay, so basically there are 3 things that are required for having a satisfying, self-fulfilling life, all right? And this is really simple stuff, right? And it's really basic, and you might look at it and be like, I don't think she really knows because that seems a little bit too easy or a little bit too obvious or a little bit too whatever. But remember that truth is always pretty simple, right? And when we make things super complicated, and when you're listening to spiritual teachers or self-help gurus or whatever who make all of their concepts very difficult to understand and you need a PhD in psychology to know what's going on, they're probably actually not touching on the truth, and it's not going to feel good on your body, and it's not going to feel good in your mind, because the truth is simple. The truth is pretty easy, and the truth is very intuitive. And so just allow yourself to kind of relax, and if you have objections to what I'm saying, that's fine. You're totally allowed to have that. But what I want you to do is just relax into this. Just notice how your body feels when I'm explaining these concepts, rather than checking into your mind so much, right? Because the mind is going to be like, no, that's too easy, that's too simple, what could she possibly know, And again, you're allowed to think that stuff, that's totally fine. It's just that I don't want you to miss something that could really make you feel better and make your life more awesome, because you're tuning into your overactive mind rather than tuning into your body, which knows the truth, okay? And which knows that truth is simple. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say for the preamble of this one. Just relax, right? Don't get all up in your head about it. You can allow yourself to take some time to digest it. If you get offended by what I'm saying at first, that's fine. Just kind of let yourself process it, okay? All right. So the 3 steps, I'm going to tell you what the 3 steps are now in this video, and then I will expand on them as we go along. The 3 steps to having a satisfying spiritual life, or to having, to moving into being your highest self so that you can actually live as the person you know yourself to be, which is possible, are very simple. Number 1 is developing essentially self-awareness of what isn't working, right? And it's developing this self-awareness of what isn't working in the context of a self-loving path rather than a self-improvement path, okay? Step number 2 is to allow yourself to conceptualize the vision and the feeling for who you know yourself to be, right? So rather than trying to fix what's wrong with you, or focusing on so much on what you think is wrong or what's gone sideways, or you allow yourself to have the vision and the feeling and to cultivate the knowing of who you truly are, right? And you allow yourself to have that vision and to create that vision and to reduce your fear about that vision. And then the 3rd thing is opening yourself up to the wisdom and the guidance and the change and the transformation that needs to take place in order to get you from where you are thinking you are today to where you truly have always been as your higher self. Okay, so those are the 3 steps. Number 1, just finally being honest about what isn't working, right? Number 2, allowing yourself to have a vision of where you want to go instead of trying to just fix the problem by focusing on the problem. And number 3, opening yourself to the journey that takes you from where you are to where you want to be, okay? So in step number 1, we simply start to become aware of what isn't working. And this is what I want to say, okay? Every journey that is truly transformational, every insight, every just like anything that's going to take you from living in a fear-based reality, in a self-sabotaging reality, in a reality where you are disconnected and dissociated from yourself. That is painful, essentially. That takes you from a reality of pain to a reality of pleasure. Starts with shit falling apart, okay? And so this is what I want to say to everyone out there, okay? Is that as your soul is calling you forward, and as you are attempting to step into the greater, more expanded, more alive, more aware, more loving, more centered, more grounded, higher version of yourself, okay? This has happened to you 100 million times, and I'm going to tell you what's happening, right? It's that you get all excited about it at first, and then it feels like shit just hits the fan. Like all your triggers come up, life falls apart around you, you get sick, you lose your job, you lose your marriage, you do this, you do that, like life just completely falls apart. And all of your fear comes to the surface, right? You flip out. All of the things that you were being able to maintain, kind of like, or you thought you had gotten over, or you felt like you were being able to kind of keep them at bay or under the surface or whatever, come to the surface as loud as ever, okay? And this is usually what freaks everybody out, everybody just back into never changing, right? Is that at the beginning, what happens is you don't get to start to taste the new life at first, okay? You don't get to start to live in the new awesome reality that you know you're heading towards. When your soul is calling you forward, you get that urge to change, you get that urge that something isn't right, you get that urge that you want to do something, you go to a life coaching seminar, then you come back into your life. The first thing that's going to happen is everything's going to fall apart, whether internally or externally or both, okay? And I want you to understand that this is normal, okay? So when like all of your fear is coming up and you feel like totally overwhelmed and you thought you had dealt with it, and all of this is happening, and when you're sabotaging yourself and you, like I say, your life is falling apart, don't look at that like, oh man, this is a sign I'm never going to be who I want to be. Don't look at that as a sign, as an obstacle. Don't look at that as like a sign that you shouldn't keep going, or that you can't ever be your higher self, or that this is never going to happen for you. This is the sign that it's starting. That life is supporting you by destroying the foundations, okay? It's ripping out the rotten foundations that have never worked. So that's what's happening, okay? So when you get on board with that, and you say, okay, all of my fear is coming up. All my self-sabotaging behaviors are flaring up, right? All the things that I was afraid was going to happen in my life are happening in my life, and I'm freaking out. All of this stuff is happening. This is the beginning of the process, okay? So that's the first thing I want you to understand. Shit's going to hit the fan, and it always does, and it always will, and that's a good sign, not a bad sign. So when shit is hitting the fan in your life, I want you to, instead of starting to freak out, I want you to think, oh, this is change. This is evolution. This is me ripping out the rotten foundations from under myself, right? Life is ripping the rotten foundations from under me, but really I'm doing it to myself. So that's number one. So in this time, the thing that's going to make it the most productive for you is to self-lovingly acknowledge what is not serving you. So start to look at your self-sabotaging behaviors, the things that you do that you know hurt you. And if you're confused about what a self-sabotaging behavior is, what you have in your life that's serving a purpose of making you feel better in the moment, but is actually causing you pain and suffering long term, right? And these are the things that are holding you not as your higher self. These are the things that are holding you addicted to suffering, addicted to your pain, addicted to the drama, which is pretty much what we are as a consciousness right now, are all the things that have a negative backlash. So anything that brings you joy that has a negative backlash is a self-sabotaging behavior. Anything that brings you calm that has a negative backlash is a self-sabotaging behavior. Anything that brings you numbness or, right, like that alters your state in a way that you want it to be altered, but then you have to pay a price. You must understand that this is a self-sabotaging behavior that is technically not working for you. Okay? It's working for you in the moment, right? And I want you to start to expand your awareness and your consciousness of this, right? Don't be one of those people that says, well, the drinking is working for me, right? Because look, it makes me feel better. Or the eating shitty is working for me because look, it makes me feel better. Da 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 da. No, you need to be honest with yourself. In the grand scheme of your life, in the grand picture of what's going on with you, is your behavior working for you in the sense that it's making you joyful overall? Or is it working for you in the sense that it's numbing something out and then you get a drama cycle where you have to pay it back? Because those are two very different things, right? And so what I say is, in this first phase, you need to start to look at the things in your life that are causing the drama cycles, that are causing the cycle of pain that you have to repay, that you then get more pain, and so you engage in the cycle again to numb the pain or make yourself happy or make yourself joyful for a moment, but then there's a payback, right? And there's the drama cycle. And that drama cycle that we do over and over and over again, many of us have a couple of them in our lives that we engage in. We have a couple of drama cycles in our relationships. We have a drama cycle with our body. We have a drama cycle with our mind, right? And we engage in these cycles over and over and over again, right? And so the first step is to say, okay, look, I'm not wrong. I'm not stupid. I'm not broken. I'm not an idiot. I'm not weak. I'm not incapable. I'm not all these shitty stories I'm telling myself about this self-sabotaging behavior, okay? And to admit that this isn't working for me doesn't make me wrong. So this is the first thing, right? Most people don't want to admit that their self-sabotaging behaviors aren't working for them because they feel like that is admitting that they are wrong, that they are bad, and that they are stupid, all right? So remember, that's your lizard brain. So when you start to look at the things in your life that aren't working for you, and you start to be honest about yourself, about the things that are like, this is not me as my highest self. This is not who I know myself to be, right? Anything that feels like shit is not me living as my highest self. Anything that feels like shit is me not living as my highest self. All right? Life is not supposed to hurt. Life is not supposed to be the worst thing ever. Life is not supposed to be a big struggle. All right? And even to have that belief that, like, well, yes, it is. Look at it. Look at how it is. Da 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 da. Just notice how that feels in your body. Right? So you start to acknowledge the things that are not working for you. And then you start to entertain the idea that anything that feels like shit needs to be looked at and questioned with love. So then you apply the lizard technique that we did in the last video, okay? Any thought that makes you feel less than amazing, any idea that makes you feel less than your higher self, anything that makes you feel insignificant, small, in pain, tension, anxiety, fear, guilt, shame, depression, da 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 da, any of those thoughts need to be loved like that lizard. Okay, they need to be looked at like that lizard. Because these are the beginnings of the foundation being ripped out, right? You need to acknowledge the foundations you've built your self-identity on. And that's what this is. When shit is hitting the fan, that is your awareness bringing to your awareness the foundations of shit you've built your identity on, which are the reasons why you're not living as your highest self. Okay, because you already are your highest self. Your highest self already is. The reason you don't act on it, the reason you don't live as that person, and the reason you don't have the life experiences that would align with being that person is because you don't identify with being that person. You have built your identity upon a foundation of lies, of things that are not true. And they are actually just mirrors of who you are. Okay? So this is why you admit to what's not working with the intention that you're loving yourself through it. So you're not blaming yourself for what's not working. You're not shaming yourself for what's not working. And again, when that starts to happen, you love the little lizard. You recognize that it's just the lizard, and you love it like the lizard, right? And then you give yourself permission not to beat yourself up, and you, right? You start to say, okay, this is not making me a bad person. This is not something for me to be ashamed of. I'm bringing this up so that I can love it back into the light. And then again, you start to acknowledge that these things about you that you hate and that are self-sabotaging and that are holding you back from being your higher self are simply the misidentifications you have of yourself. And it's good for them to come up. You want them to come up. So you're acknowledging what's not working with love. Okay? Just acknowledge what's not working with love. Acknowledge the drama cycles that it creates and recognize that drama is not the same thing as happiness. That these drama cycles are keeping you from things that we will talk about in the next video, right? But they are not actually serving you. You don't want to be in these drama cycles, right? Because it hurts, right? So that second thing is acknowledging that anything that hurts is not the truth. And even the idea that you want to say to me, that's not true, right? I have to believe these painful thoughts. I have to believe this stuff that hurts. If it wasn't true, why would I be thinking it all the time, right? Look at that. Does that feel good? To believe that painful things are real? Does that feel good? You see what I'm saying? Start to apply the technique of anything that feels terrible. You love it like the lizard, okay? So that's the two things we do to acknowledge. And then the third thing is basically don't try to fix any of this stuff, right? Your instinct is going to be to either wallow in it and be like, oh, I'm just so lost in this and I'm never going to get out of it and I'm so broken and blah, 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 blah. Or you're going to be like, great, I'll just do my positive thinking, or I'll do my positive journaling, or I'll just ignore this, or I'll go out and do this and do blah, blah, blah. Don't do that either, okay? Don't get all crazy. You're just acknowledging, looking, and then being loving. That's the third step, is you just love yourself inside of that. You're just gentle and you're calm. You notice the voice that wants to kick you into this hyperdrive perfectionism mode, or you recognize the voice that just wants to say, well, I'm a piece of shit and I'm never going to change. And you look at that and again, hold that as the lizard, right? I get it. I see you. I know. We're not going to do either of those two things, right? We're not going to wallow in that. We're not going to go crazy with self-sabotage or with self-improvement. Neither of these things ever worked, right? Neither of these two things have ever gotten you to be in an ecstatic experience in your life, okay? So again, you love it, and then you just stay still. And that's all I want you to do, okay? So acknowledge what's not working in a self-loving way. That is the first and most important thing. Notice yourself beating yourself up and don't, right? Do the lizard thing. You know the lizard technique. Acknowledge what's not working. And knowing that the acknowledging what's not working is simply your higher self pointing out to you the rotten foundations that have nothing to do with who you actually are. Number 2, anything that feels terrible, you love it in the lizard way, right? And then so like the negative thing that says I can't do this because this, and this, you love it, and you say, now I'm just going to take a little step forward, just to prove it to you that we're not all going to die, right? And it's not the worst thing ever. You just move a little bit forward. And if you don't have a vision, you don't know any of that, you just love that voice, right? And then the third thing is when you get all inspired to go on your self-improvement path, or you're going to get all inspired to just like beat yourself up and hate yourself, again, you love that part of you. You send yourself love and compassion. You rest. You allow more things to come up, and you do the same thing over and over again. You're just in the cycle of letting things come up so that you can look at them, not blame yourself, and be loving looking at this rotten foundation. That's all that is. Step 1, looking at the rotten foundations in a loving way. Okay? In part 2, we'll talk about what to do next, but for now, just practice this. All right? So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. But if you are wanting to know what to do next, don't ask me that, because that's going to be in the next couple of videos. If you want to follow me, Facebook, Perception Trainers, Instagram, ally_perceptiontrainers, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Join Patreon. We have 3 meetings a month. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.